Thank you, BB. Thank you for hosting. Thank you for just to see everybody's a blessing. And we don't know everybody in it who comes on. We haven't met everybody face to face, person to person in different countries. But many of you we know person to person. We just came from our one of the Sunday morning meetings we go to. I just got in, and thankfully the holiday traffic's died down, so it wasn't too horrible fighting through the traffic. But at that meeting, we had communion. It happened that Chris was leading the meeting this morning, and he just felt from the Lord to begin the meeting with having communion together. And he read extensively from Scripture. I believe Chris is our son-in-law, actually, married to our daughter Ginny, and very interesting to hear him read Scripture. He read to begin the meeting just a little over 2 chapters from the second letter to the Corinthians. And I've heard him read before, and sometimes he does it in other meetings, and it's a real gift he has in simply reading extensive portions of Scripture that the Lord lays on his heart, and he's perhaps read several times just even today. And that's the way that he led us into communion, and it was a very open time. And one of the reasons I'm actually speaking from Habakkuk in the way that I want to do this morning or this evening for you in Asia and Australia is that BB actually wrote to me at the end of the week and said, could we have communion? That's the, the bread and the wine. And I said, no, I didn't think that I wanted to do that, but you have provoked me in the direction that I want to take in the book of Habakkuk. And it was very wonderful to have very meaningful communion with the people. There was about 49 people, Hazel thought, at the meeting this morning. We all sit round in a big circle with the minimum of accoutrements, just one guitar who can pick up, the person can pick up the keys when people start singing a song. And there was a number of prophetic words and 3 or 4 or 5 brothers and sisters, at least, who communicated from the word. They communicated in prayer, they communicated in song, they communicated in reading Scripture. Prophetic words came, and we approached something near a true gathering of God's people. Always remember that the church is the people gathered, and the people gathered. And you can find that in the first letter of Corinthians, chapter 11. Sometimes it's good to ask the question, what is the church? And Scott referred to this just as he prayed that the Lord Jesus would build up the local gatherings. And then he mentioned the candlesticks shining brightly, which of course comes from the book of the Revelation. The church gathered, and I want to just encourage you. One of the blessings of COVID, and there are blessings, many that are coming from it, and it comes from the Lord. You must remember that. It comes from the Lord. It doesn't come from the devil. The devil is under the authority of the Lord. The earth is still the Lord's, and the fullness of it is the Lord's. Keep that in mind. And though the liar, one of his principal lies, of course, is I'm boss. And that's the kind of lie that Eve drank into and Adam drank into. And, our forefathers after the flesh drank into, of course, is I'm boss. I am Lord. And the enemy is still under that delusion. And I hope that delusion has begun, that he's already been crushed under your feet in some real way already, personally, in your family, in where you are. And, the church is the gathering of those that are gathered in his name. And I want to encourage you to, a lot of prayer meetings are pretty useless. And for this reason, because people are not united in one spirit, one heart, one mind. They bring their agendas, they bring their opinions, and thus the attempt at ecumenism that is, it tends to fail. And when you can get 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 40 or 50 that are truly gathered into his name, into his person, into his life, into his purposes, into his power, whether there's 2, whether there's 20, 200, 2,000, that is where the real prayer comes to pass. The prayer that breaks things open, where things are done and they are wrought. And one of the things the Lord spoke to us this morning about was, it's happening in the United States. Understand this clearly. The devil's work in the United States is divide and rule. Divide and rule. Stalin did this in Russia. He divided them by nurturing suspicion between departments and powers and races that were within the Soviet system. And so understand that the devil's work in the United States is to Black Lives Matter, black, as opposed to white, white supremacists. You've got the devil separating teenagers and the young and Generation X and generation and all the rest of it. And it's the devil's work in order to conquer. And you've got Democrat from the GOP, the grand old party, the Republicans, let's divide them. And so it goes on. And we, God's people, are to have nothing to do with it. Jesus ascended on high, Psalm 24, fling wide the gates that the King of glory may come in, Psalm 24. And the King of glory came and entered into the Father's presence in the heaven of heavens. The King of glory entered in, having lived the life, died the death, resurrected, ascended, and sat down. The King of glory entered in. Swing wide the gates of the temple in heaven. The everlasting doors are the ones in heaven. And he entered in there, and then some days later, you will all know that there were some people waiting on earth, and the doors of their hearts were flung wide open to they knew not what, except Jesus called it being enveloped with power from on high. Jesus called it, you shall be baptized in the Holy Spirit not many days hence. But they didn't know exactly what it all meant. But there were 120 of them, young, old, men, women, etc., etc. And you know the story of Pentecost. And down from heaven came the fire of God's own nature by the Holy Spirit's ministry into the hearts of those whose doors were wide open. I'm thinking in terms of the second half of Psalm 24, which begins with the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, and it goes on later on in that short psalm, and with the everlasting doors, the King of glory. And you know, it's wonderful to realize, and wherever, praise God, whether in Ireland, Elsie and some folks are on from Ireland today. It's lovely to have them from Ballahadreen. I remember Ireland. My wife is Irish. I remember going there first, I think in 69, or maybe it was 68, I don't recall. I think it was 60, no, anyway, it doesn't matter. And I remember us trying to have meetings in 70, 71, 72. And you know, nobody came, virtually nobody came. In darkest Ireland, a man named Stanley Mahwini wrote a book. Did you know that in 1970s, that if someone had stood up in many Irish villages and towns to speak the gospel, they would be stoned? Did you realize that? People would throw things at them, pelt them with eggs or something like that. As recent as that. And when we tried to have meetings, and then something happened around 1975, I remember how something began to happen. From heaven it came, and it came to Ballahadreen, where the Lord broke in on hearts there. And he drew people to open the gates of their beings to what was coming from heaven. And you understand in your life that the devil's busy trying to get you to close your gates again. Whereas the Lord's purpose in the gathering of the saints is to draw you into the states where you will let nothing shut the gates of your hearts. And you will let no problem, no hurt, no bitterness, nothing shut the gates of your hearts to him, so that the King of glory, by the power of the Spirit, enters in you freshly day by day. This is communion. This is real communion, where the King of glory, the essence of communion, is fellowship with God through his Son and by the Spirit. And you must keep the gates open with all the freshness that comes from heaven, of wondrous sufficiency for the circumstances that are eventuating today. The changing scenes in Malaysia, Mahati is gone, this and that and the other, what's working in the background, what is going to come in the background, Australia, I think of it all. And the restrictions, the Mr. Biden contradicting himself big time on Thursday or Wednesday, chiding Americans big time for not having vaccinations, and then calling for unity on 9/11 Saturday yesterday, and total self-contradiction. And these things are not our kingdom. Our kingdom, our fellowship is with the Father and with his Son, Jesus Christ. Keep the doors open, the gates of your hearts for the daily inflowings of the river of his life, and the upspringings for the life of God springs up from within and flows from without, and it's wonderful, clear, crystal flowing waters from God's heart. And you will be sufficient for the day, for the hour, for the eventualities, whatever they may be. And of course, this involves a complete change of mind, so that the children of God in the book of Acts, and you can go on, they were of one soul, they were of one mind, and that one-mindedness was brought about by the blessed Lord, wasn't it? They had to stay utterly open and be taught of the Lord. So you can remember some of the wrestlings. Dear Peter, for instance, on more than one occasion, an apostle who had to undergo some fundamental mind changes, didn't he? You remember when he didn't want to go into the house of Cornelius. You remember how the Lord was dealing with him. Do you remember the vision coming down? He had to undergo a great mind change. That he was enlarged in his understanding. And then he had a bit of a problem with the Apostle Paul, didn't he? Because Paul had to rebuke him publicly because he was still having difficulty in his mind bringing things of the old, the Jew and the Gentile together. And so if it happens for an apostle, you and I must understand that we must all undergo the shift from being a conflicted prophet, the title for today, conflicted prophet, to becoming, how did I put it? I can't remember, a communing companion or something like that I put it, because this is the process through which God takes us. He wants to bring you and me into very wonderful oneness with himself, oneness with him and his emotions, in his affections, one heart with God, one mind with God, so that the flow of the river of the water of life can have free course through your heart and life. You are a living person. You are not fixed. You are not someone incapable of growth, of increase. And that is true as far as your inner life is concerned, right the way through to the end of your time here on earth. And it is most certainly true in the life to come. Our state is not fixed. There will be increase and growth in the life to come. And this is what the Father seeks. It's wonderful. Peter, in his 3rd chapter of his first letter, he tells us that it is God's will that Jesus came to bring us to God. Isn't that wonderful? I often think of that. Not to bring us to heaven, not to bring us into some kind of image that we may have of a pure life, a holy life, some fixed state where we don't drink, we don't smoke, we put our hair in a bun or something. If you're a lady, wouldn't get far putting my hair in a bun. And if you don't know what a bun is, it doesn't matter. Where it's all piled up on top of the head. Anyway, it's not bringing us to a fixed state. He's bringing us to God. That's why Jesus came, to bring us to God. And isn't it wonderful? God's mind, God's affections, God's hates, God's loves, God, to bring us to God. And isn't it tremendous? You understand that what's called the hypostatic union theologically, when you read the Gospels, you read about Jesus, and you find that in Jesus, God and man in oneness blending. That's the hypostatic union, where Jesus is God and Jesus is man. Jesus was doing a work for 33 years where human nature became the friend of God. Human heart in all its powers. It's wonderful. He grew in wisdom and understanding, and he is the guarantee, you understand, that this should be happening to you through Christ, where you are becoming freed from the things that conflict you. Don't understand why you do this, Lord. Don't understand why you allow that, Lord. Don't understand why you allow suffering, Lord. Don't understand this, and you get annoyed with God, where you come to an increasing understanding of what God is doing. And of course, that sets you free from the weakness of much prayer. Much prayer that concerns itself with things that we shouldn't be concerned with, things that God is taking care of, sorting out in his own way. The more, so we're delivered from being conflicted, even if we're a prophet, conflicted, and into someone who's a real companion of God. I wanted to put the word friend down. I hope you are aware that no one ever called himself the friend of God. But God called certain people his friends. And Jesus said something very wonderful. He said, I've called you friends. That's chapter 15 of John's Gospel. So when you come into Habakkuk, and I could talk about Job this way, but if you look in Habakkuk chapter 3, which is kind of where we've got this may be reminiscent to you of another place in the scripture. This is how it begins, chapter 3, a prayer of Habakkuk. Now, you remember that Habakkuk means embracing. Habakkuk became someone who became his name. Someone, he didn't embrace sin, but he embraced God. That was God's intention, Everything in your life and mine, in the intention of God, is to bring us into the warm embrace of God mentally and in all our powers, in everything, into the embrace of God, so that we embrace his ways and he embraces us right in. And here's, it says it's the prayer of Habakkuk. Now, this is in my Bible here is 19 verses, but interestingly enough, there are only 2 petitions in the prayer, in the whole thing. And you'll find the 2 petitions that are to be found in verse 2. And here they are in the second half of verse 2. These are the only 2 requests that he makes in the whole prayer. In the midst of the years, renew your work, Lord, or revive your work. That's the first one. And the second petition is in wrath, remember mercy. Just 2 petitions. It's remarkable, isn't it? It's a prayer, he calls it. A prayer of the one who's embracing God according to Shigionoth. I mean, no one quite knows what Shigionoth means. They hazard some guesses. It's a musical term, they say, to do with erratic meter, which encourages me a bit. I hate, I must admit, I hate this so-called free verse, which is just prose. But anyway, some sort of meter or other. We sang a song this morning in the meeting, within the veil, I now do come. You know that one, you see, and there's a meter. There's a regularity in that, certain number of syllables in each line, so that and poetry's like that, and 14-line poems. Do you know what they're called? Anyway, we won't go into poetry, but just 2 things. The prayer, and he just prays one thing. And this is what he says. This is how he starts it all off. Oh Lord, I've heard the report of thee, and thy work, O Lord, do I fear. Thee, thy work. Thee, I've heard a report of thee, and thy work, O Lord, do I fear. I find that very beautiful. Does it remind any of you of someone else? Because it reminds me, of course, as soon as I was musing on that, my mind went way back to Job. You remember how Job had a mind and an opinion? He became a thoroughly conflicted man. You remember all the news that came to him? Satan involved in it, though he didn't know that. God didn't tell Job about Satan and his goings on. But dear Job was led through, and all the stuff spilled out. Remember the 3 philosophizing people? The best thing they ever did was shut their mouths for a week and sit with Job. And then they started to say their bits and philosophize about why this had happened and that had happened and the other thing had happened and the other thing had happened, and Job, it's all your fault, and this is that and the other, and all the philosophical views, and then Eliphaz comes on the scene, doesn't he? Is it? And he speaks, and he's a younger man. Elihu is his name, and he's got more sense than the other 3. Speaks more sense. But even that's not enough until in the end, every voice is silenced. Every voice is silenced. And that's a wonderful thing. And then God speaks, doesn't he? He speaks to Job and says a number of things to him. I mean, chapter 40 of Job, chapter 40, verse 4, this is how Job speaks back to the Lord. Behold, I am of small account. What shall I answer thee? I lay my hand on my mouth. I've spoken once, and I will not answer twice, but I will proceed no further. And then the Lord just answers Job just by saying, were you there? Were you there when I did this, when I did that, when I did the other? And, when I created this, and, it's very wonderful the way God answers him and speaks to him. And then verse 1 of chapter 42 of Job. Then Job answered the Lord, I know that thou canst do all things, and that no purpose of thine can be thwarted. Who is this that hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore I've uttered what I didn't understand, things too wonderful for me which I did not know. Hear, and I will speak, I will question you, and you declare to me. That's what I said to you, and that's how silly I was. Verse 5, I had heard of thee by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees thee. Therefore I despise myself and repent in sackcloth, in dust and ashes. And there's the words that are reminiscent. If you're reading those Habakkuk words, oh Lord, I've heard of thee. Oh Lord, I've heard of thee. The report of thee. He'd heard something. And thy work, O Lord, do I fear. You've been working, Lord, and I didn't understand. I didn't understand. And so you're introduced. So if you go back in the book of Habakkuk to the first chapter, and here's Habakkuk in his conflict. Now you understand that his conflict is not the conflict of argumentation. He's not trying to tell God his business, but he is genuinely confused. What's happening in the world, our world, back there? This Chaldean, these, Medes and Persians, these empires. What's happening? The sin in our nation. He's a prophet. He cares about his nation. His people are adrift. I hope you feel a bit like that about the church. That somehow, you'll get nowhere with God. I'll get nowhere with God unless I'm listening to the intuitive voice in the deeps of my being. Some of you, I know, from my experience of you in Malaysia, show up to church purposely late. Or you hang around in the foyer of the church drinking coffee until the 50 minutes of the noise from the front stops. Why do you do that? Intuitively, it's not just musical taste. You sense something is wrong. And, something wrong with the direction the churches have been going. You sense it, but you don't say anything. because you're going to upset somebody. But you see, Habakkuk in his day, he knows something's wrong in Jerusalem with the worship. He knows that there's some faithful ones there, but he senses the ominous presence of the empire gathering, darkness gathering round about him and around the people. I hope you feel something like that now. Afghanistan is not a flash in the pan. You know what Biden said about mandating that you get your jab or you lose your job. It's not a flash in the pan. It's control. It's domination. It's the empire. These are the things that are taking place. And I hope that your concerns, of course, are with the nations, but that your real concern is with the people of God. And this is how Habakkuk begins. He says, "How long, O Lord," verse 2, "shall I cry? I cry. I cry. I'm conflicted. I don't understand. They're cruel, they're wicked, they're harsh, they're hard. Sennacherib came down like a wolf on the fold. His cohorts were gleaming in purple and gold. It's a poem. Was it Tennyson, I think? He's talking about, the empire coming down like a wolf on the fold. That's Old Testament. Your sheep, Lord, your sheep. And dear Habakkuk, he cries, "Oh Lord, how long shall I cry for help? And thou wilt not hear." And this is how he begins. His whole heart is reaching out after God's answer. And how God answers him. We've covered the ground a bit in chapter 1. And God begins to say to him, "It's me, it's me. I'm using these to work in my people. I'm going to sift them. I'm going to purify them. I'm going to bring my people to where I want to be." And dear Habakkuk, verse 12, chapter 1, he confesses, his heart begins to understand the nature of evil, that evil must be judged by serious means, that God can't dwell with his people. He's of purer eyes than to behold evil. You can't look on wrong. And it turns into a little question again. The wicked are swallowing your people up. Look what's happening. There seem to be, you're making men like fish of the sea. He says that somehow the enemy's getting big advantage. And not only is he getting big advantage, look, he's even proud of it. That's how the end of the chapter comes. He's even worshipping the things he's doing. And then this is the second. So Habakkuk is beginning to move. I'm crying to you, O Lord. I'm crying to you about the circumstances. And God begins to answer him. And then this is his response, chapter 2, verse 1. Okay, I'm going to stand on my watch and I'm going to station myself on my tower and I'm going to listen. I'm going to listen to what God will answer me. I'm quite convinced that he will answer. I'm quite convinced that he will give me clarity. I'm quite convinced that when I need to know, as I need to know, that he will answer. Tremendous, isn't it? That he will give me a sufficiency of understanding, because all my heart is to be in companionship with God, so that I may be utterly one mind with him. So I'll stand on my watch. I will do so in faith. God speaks to him, of course, in the famous words in chapter 2, verse 2. The Lord answered me. The Lord answered me. Tremendous, tremendous. It's a tremendous thing. The Lord answered me. He began to really hear. And, he says, verse 4, the righteous one shall live by faith. Seeing God, hearing God, resting in God, in fellowship with God. Faith brings us into that condition. And then you get this dirge that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. And in the midst of all that dirge is this wonderful word, the earth shall be filled, verse 14, with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord. God's glory only emerges in both judgment and mercy. Habakkuk is moving through. Yesterday was 9/11. I know I've said this before. I don't know whether anybody here has heard me say it, but 20 years ago, someone phoned us up. Hazel and I were looking after my mother in those days. We were at the supermarket, I remember it clearly, and someone phoned me up and said, get to a TV quick. And we drove home rapidly and put the TV on, and I think we caught one of those planes, just one of those planes hitting one of the buildings. And my heart was a strange mixture, I have to say to you. I was shocked, but something in me was saying, hallelujah, hallelujah. And that sounds a callous thing to certain ears, but my heart was saying, hallelujah, Lord. I was in the book of the Revelation in my mind, where the hallelujahs begin to rise in the book of the Revelation, only when Babylon falls, the city, the city, the things that man has built, the pride of man wrapped up in it, for man's pride, and something rose in me, and then along with it, oh Lord, have mercy, have mercy. An intuitive cry rising in my heart, just the same as this, just the same. The glory of the Lord, oh, the glory of God involves the decimation of all that displeases, the tearing down of all the constructs of men. The pride. Hazel and I were driving back from the meeting this morning. It's about a 17-mile drive, not far, down one of the freeways and into the city. And we were talking about the vaccination. One of the sisters who works for the NHS in this country, National Health Service, she said to me at the beginning of the meeting, I was talking to her, and I said one or two things to her. She's a precious lady. She's Russian. And I said to her, you know, you've been a very strong and tough lady. And she kind of was a little bit embarrassed. I said, it's true, isn't it? She's been through a lot. She's been through a lot. And I said, you must let God sort of reach the deeps of your heart, my dear. And she said, I know. I've been working for the National Health Service, and I've not been vaccinated, she said. And I know, and I won't be, she says, and I know I shall lose my job. And I know that God is going to take things away from me because I have been tough. And perhaps the only way you can do things with me is to strip me. And what's going to happen? Our income, my children, this and that, and so on and so on. You know, isn't it a remarkable thing how God is working out the counsels of his will, that things have got to go. The earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord. Only, just think of dear Noah. You know, the glory of that fresh morning when Noah got out of the ark. Do you remember? When he got out of the ark with the other 7, and the animals came out of the ark, and everything was new. Everything was new. The glory of the Lord was there in a measure, because everything that was offensive had been inundated in the judgment. The glory of the Lord. And yet there was mercy, for there were 8 souls saved. Because isn't it a tremendous thing? And so the way that Habakkuk comes to the end of chapter 2 is, of course, that the Lord grants to him. Can you see the companionship that's developing in this man? Can you see that he's been up on his watch? He's quit his arguings. He wants understanding. He's beginning to grasp what God is doing. There's no callousness in it. He knows that the glory of the Lord is going to come in all the earth. And then he comes to this: the Lord is in his holy temple. Verse 20. Let all the earth keep silence before him. Amen. That's where he came to. He understood already he was there in the silence. And he's saying, oh, God's in his holy temple. I don't know if I may ask you this. You know that you're a temple of the Holy Ghost, don't you? You do know that. You know that God's not interested in a temple in Jerusalem now. He's interested in you. You're the temple of the Holy Spirit. The Lord is in his holy temple. Your heart, your inner man. Let all the fleshly arguments keep silence. Let all the stuff that rises up in you keep silence. Keep silence. And you'll begin to hear him. You'll begin to commune with him as Lord, him as Father, him as God, him as all-powerful, him who is working. That's why when you do get to chapter 3 and Habakkuk, he can't keep silent now. He's got to cry out. So he cried. That's the first thing. Chapter 2, he stood on his watch and waited that he might hear. And then chapter 3, he begins to hear. I heard the report of thee. It rises from the deeps, you know. It rises from God in the temple of your heart. You'll begin to hear his report, a report of God, a report of God that's brought to you by the Holy Ghost. A report of God that isn't a pale Galilean, some weak Jesus, some lovey-dovey person that you can manipulate. You'll hear the Spirit of God bring God to you, bring Jesus, the Lord and the Christ to you. God will be magnified in you. You'll hear the report of him more and more and more. And along with that, you'll begin to see his work. He's working out all things according to the counsel of his will. The things that are taking place in history today are truly his story. God's story. You see, you will begin to perceive God is working. God is working. There was a man named Alex, and I've forgotten his surname. Hale and I met him once. He and his brother come from Atlanta. And is it Buchanan? Alex Buchanan, that's the name. And they made some movies. The first one 20 years ago, I think it was called Flywheel or something, they're Christian movies. And he made us, there's one I think called War Room, one of the more recent ones. But we met him. And earlier this year, he put out a prophetic word. He wouldn't have called it that, a general letter, but it was prophetic. And in that letter, it's quite short. He says, God's working through what's happening in government in the United States. And his chief view, the thing that he has in view, is to purge his North American church. To sift it, to prune it. He's realizing, you see, he's hearing something, a report of God. God can't put up with all this commercial show that the church has become. He can't put up with it. The excuse for the gospel that's being peddled in so many quarters, give your heart to Jesus and you'll go to heaven. There's nothing like that in the Bible. God can't put up with it. It doesn't lead anywhere. It doesn't lead to transformed young people. It doesn't lead to them being spotless in his sight, or older people come to that. You see, and so Alex Buchanan put this message out that he felt on his heart. And some of you are hearing other prophetic words that are coming through. He's speaking, but it's all in the Bible. It's all in the Bible. It's all there. You see, and one of the first things he has to do with all of us is what he said to those people who returned to Israel, to Jerusalem. You know, in the days a little later, after the Babylonian captivity, after the 70 years, some of them came back. There were two prophets who prophesied. You may remember their names, Haggai and Zechariah. And one of the things that God says through Haggai, who's a very ordered man, he dates his prophecies and everything. Oh, consider your ways. Consider your ways. That's what God says. I think it's 3 times through Haggai. Consider your ways. You've sown. done this and you've reaped little and you've built your own nice houses. Consider your ways. Consider your ways. And he says, and my house, you haven't been building that. You haven't been building that. You've been considering your own thing. Consider your ways. And these are among God's ways. You see, thy work do I fear, Lord. I mean, if I'm still entertaining sin in my heart, it's all got to go. If me and mine and everything of me is first, it's all got to go. You see, and thus the Lord purges and prunes. And then, oh, thy work, Lord. You've got to do, it's a long work, Lord. And this is what I love. Now these petitions come. So you understand. I cried. I waited. I watched on my tower. Now he says, I've heard and I fear. I heard and I fear. That's how it comes. And if you go down to verse 7, you'll find that it says a little bit further on, verse 7, I saw. And then verse 16, it says, I hear and I tremble. Tremendous, isn't it? All these soul states through which he's going. He's becoming a companion of God in what God is doing. He's going through the cry. He's coming to the waiting and the watching. He's coming to the state where he's hearing the report of thee and of thy work, O Lord. Then he sees more clearly. Verse 7, I saw. And then he comes to this place where verse 16, I hear and I tremble. And what else does he say there? I quietly wait for the day of trouble to come upon the people who invade us. I quietly wait. Scott prayed about that ultimate day when the blessed Lord Jesus shall crush Satan finally under his feet. Is that right? That's how. So there is that which is going on now. We're under your feet. The Lord can crush the enemy under your feet. You can put your foot on the neck of the enemy with Jesus. You remember Joshua? He put his foot on the neck, and then he said to the others, the elders, now come and put your feet on the neck with me. That's what Jesus says to us. He's our Joshua. He says, now come along, put your feet on the neck. You understand? And dear Habakkuk, embracing God's will, that's his name. And he comes to this place in verse 16 where he says, I hear, I tremble, I quietly wait. I quietly wait. But it doesn't finish there. I quietly wait for what? For the day of trouble to come upon the people who invade us, the enemies. Hallelujah. For the day of trouble to come upon them, as it did. Where is Rome? Where is the great British Empire? Where is the great Soviet Union? Where shall be the great China? This is the Spirit's vision. This is the sight. God is in his holy temple. Let the earth keep silence. Blessed are those of his people, of God's people, that are doing this. But it doesn't end there, does it? It's not the last I. in the Habakkuk book, isn't it? What's the last two I's? Verse 18, I will rejoice in the Lord. I will joy in the God of my salvation. Could you see the process from being a conflicted prophet to a communing companion who understands something of what God is doing, who is one mind with him? He goes through the cry, the waiting, the watching. He comes to the hearing, the report, and of the work that God is doing. He comes to a greater seeing, and then he comes to this hearing. So wonderful to me. And trembling when I realize what God is about, what God is doing, and he's done it first in me. You know, he's been doing it in me, he's done it in me. And then you come to this where I quietly wait. It's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And you say, what's all this business then that you find from, you know, in wrath, remember mercy. In the midst of the years, revive thy work in the midst of the years. Yes, yes, oh people of God in North America. Oh people of God in Malaysia. Oh people of God in Australia. Oh people of God in China, in Europe. Oh people of God, let the petitions rise in the midst of all that you are doing, Lord, in all the midst of it happening. Oh Lord, in the midst of the years, make your work known. Do a work, revive your church in the midst of it. Make her strong, Lord. Make her beautiful, Lord. Purge her, Lord. In the midst of it all, O Church of God, fear not. Revive thy work in the midst of the years. You say, oh dear, it sounds like an impossible prayer. Yes, yeah, but he's waiting, he's watching, he's hearing, he's seeing, he's understanding, he's grasping what God is doing. He's becoming one mind with him, and his spirit rises. Oh, in the midst of the years, Lord, in the midst of the years, while you're doing all this, while you're judging the earth, while you're judging and sifting your church, while you're doing that, oh Lord, move in the midst of the years. Move in St. Catherine's, move in Kuala Lumpur, purge your church, purify her, bring her into such a unity, add to her in the houses. And think of, you know, I know it's you know, you can't see these things unless you go through this process of friendship with God. You can't, unless you really get free of the nonsense prophetic ministries that are around nowadays, unless you get rid of the excuses for sin that are peddled around nowadays. You know, the love of the world, materialism, you know, it's all got to go. It's all got to go. The materialism that we Christians are riddled with it, you see. Oh dear. You know, we have to be purged of this. And then it becomes clearer and clearer and clearer. You know, and you know that, oh Lord, in the midst of all that's happening, in the midst of it all, oh, in North America, gather your people. In the houses, gather them, brothers and sisters, sold out to you, on fire for you. Those who know something of this, then the prayer will not hit the ceiling. Then there'll be unity that makes prayer go right up to the place of glory and God's answers. Tremendous. Or Malaysia, wherever you are, There was a prophetic utterance given in 98 or 89. I think it was 89 or 90. And in that prophecy, the brother who's now gone to be with the Lord many years ago, he said, do not try to fly to another country to get away from what's going to happen. There will be no safe place except in God. That's it. And I know in my spirit that's true. But in the midst of the years, and of course some of you would be thinking of Afghanistan, some will not get out at this time. Some of God's people, oh dear Lord, please help them. All right for Bernard to sort of in his nice comfortable place here in Exeter at this stage, you know, to talk like this, but for them, you know, to taste the evil front on, to see it. What shall we cry? Oh Lord, they start off, we all do. Oh, I cry, Lord, what's happening? What's happening? What's happening? It's not fair, it's terrible. And then if we begin to listen to him, he brings us to the place where we stand still, wait and watch, and he speaks. And then we come to the place where we begin to see something that the glory of the Lord shall cover the earth. Then we come that bit further to this place where the Lord is in his holy temple. He is. He is. What was it? Someone said this morning, an old sister came to the meeting today. I haven't seen her for a long while. How she loves. She hasn't been in a meeting for a couple of years. She's so glad to come in. I helped her in through the door with those things you walk with. She can hardly walk. And then she was just full of the Lord. And she said a little story. The punchline of her little story that she'd experienced was, what was it? God's about his business? How did it come?
Oh God, he's on the job.
Yes. The Lord spoke to her. It's all right. Her name's Shirley. It's all right, Shirley. I'm on the job. That's how God spoke to her. She'd lost something. I don't recall the details, but she just heard from the Lord. It's all right, Shirley, I'm on the job. It was something to do with lost money or something, which means a lot more to someone who hasn't got so much. And, you know, it's all right, Shirley, I'm on the job. And sure enough, she found what she'd lost. Tremendous things that God does, eh? You know, and I look at this and I don't know if I hope that you're embracing something of what we're trying to show. And then you come to this wonderful, you know, those who are in companionable fellowship with God in what he's doing, they shift within 5 minutes between trembling and joy. That's the strange bewilderment. You don't get bewildered, but the capacities into which we can grow. A preacher, a real preacher, should be like half a dozen men rolled into one. Well, one day is like this, one day is like that, one message is like that, one, you know, sometimes he's got a joke and humor. The next 5 minutes later, he's deadly serious. You see, you know, my lips quiver at the sound. I mean, this kind of language, my body trembles. I hear. That's verse 16. My lips quiver at the sound. Rottenness enters my bones when I think of what God is like. My steps totter beneath me. You say, well, it's poetical, this, that, and the other. You know, but he means it. He means it. Then he says, I'll quietly wait. And he's gone through this great speech about God came from Teman, verse 3, and the Holy One from Mount Paran. His glory covered the heavens, and the earth was full of his brightness was like the light, verse 4. Before him went pestilence, and plague followed behind him. You know, goodness gracious me, what's he talking about? What's Teman? What's Paran? Well, he's talking about when he delivered his people out of Egypt. That's what he's talking about. He's talking about the plagues of Egypt. He's talking about God stretching out his hand, and Pharaoh couldn't do one thing about it. That empire became bereaved of its gods and its strength. The firstborn of its strength was slain, and then all those soldiers and chariots were perished in the deep. Isn't it tremendous? This is where he is. This is where the Spirit takes him. He's reminded of this most significant event of deliverance that God gave for his forebears. And then he even gets so far as the fact they're terrified. Midian's terrified. He says in verse 7, you remember this. You remember when that prophet man, Balaam, tried to prophesy. He said, I can't prophesy against Israel. Can't do it, Barak. You can give me all the money you like. I can only encourage you to seduce them. But I can't bring one word against them. They're God's people. They're going to go in. They're going to possess the land. Hallelujah. And then you've even got bits here about the sun and moon stood still, verse 11. What's he talking about? Joshua, you remember? As God came down in power and God stopped time for a little while so that the enemy could be fully routed. Hallelujah. This is where God has taken dear Habakkuk's mind, and he's beginning to see. I feel like a baby, I tell you. I just see a little bit. I just understand a little bit. The more I see, it's a little bit like when I used to do music years ago. The more I understood about chord harmony and musical structure, the more an ignoramus I felt. I just thought, no, I don't know anything. I don't know anything. And I feel like that in these things of God, you see. I'm beginning to understand a little. I'm beginning to understand a little. You trampled the sea with your horses. Oh, bless God. You know, he did it twice, didn't he? You know, Red Sea and then Jordan. And he said, I'm hearing all this and sensing when you do things, Lord. My lips quiver, my body trembles. I quietly wait for when that's going to happen. Oh, Lord. Tremendous. Then he says these lovely words, doesn't he? I reckon you all love these. I do. Though the fig tree do not blossom, verse 17, nor fruit be on the vines, the produce of the olive fail, and the fields yield no food. We're starving. We're starving. Though this happen, the flock be cut off from the fold, and there be no herd in the stalls. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will joy in the God of my salvation. God, the Lord, is my strength. He makes my feet like hinds' feet. I understand that hinds' feet, mountain hinds, have specially constructed feet that are quite unusual. And they're constructed in such a way that they can cling on mountain sides. Mm-hmm. I think I haven't got it fully right, but just the way that God has fabricated those feet, they can cling and live and feed on places where no other creature can go. God, the Lord, is my strength. He makes my feet like hinds' feet. He makes me tread upon my high places. Wonderful. Now you can pray. Now we are praying people. Now we're church. Now, God has his companions. Now, people who are in one day crying, hearing, seeing, trembling, beholding, quietly waiting, watching, rejoicing. Now we're coming into fellowship with God. From a conflicted person to a companionable friend of God. So there you are. And that's, I think, about an hour and 10 minutes I've been sharing. And that's quite enough. And what a joy to have a look at one of our brothers, Mr. Habakkuk. Mr. Habakkuk, hey? One of our brothers. It's tremendous, isn't it? They've gone before and they call to us and say, come on, come on, come on. Come on through. Come on through. Our God is faithful. Come on through. And I don't know what you're in. I mean, our practical circumstances are, a bit different for us, he says, come on, let's see the churches built. Let's see God's people gather. Let's see the understanding increase. Let's not fear. Mm-hmm. Let's not fear what the enemy's doing, dividing. Let's come. Amen. Thank you, BB. I'm through, but I would really love to pray and then perhaps kick us off